Hey Rob, technical debt is a hot topic lately for me. Talking a lot about it, get a lot of questions about it. How does Scrum help you with it? Can you use Scrum to manage it? Do you have any thoughts to share? I know this is something you and I have talked about before, so I thought you might have some advice how people can handle technical debt in a Scrum team.
Oh man, do I ever have some advice? Hold on, let me go get my soapbox here for a second.
All right. Well, before you jump on your soapbox, we might want to just make sure we are all on the same page of what technical debt is. And I would love for you to validate this for me. I don't think I've shared this analogy with you before. Every so often in my house, a family with two young kids, my house gets a little bit cluttered. I'm sure nobody else experiences this. And then on a Friday, to my horror, I look at the calendar and say, oh, we have people coming over for dinner tonight. Now, the right way to solve that problem would be to find all those pieces of clutter and find where they should go and put them all where they should go. What actually happens is we take a big armful of clutter, just sweep it off the counter and shove it into a closet and close the door and hope nobody goes in that closet. And so if you would do that, imagine you would do that for a month, right? Every Friday, just, oh man, there's a whole bunch of clutter here. Sweep it off the counter, shove it in the closet, sweep it off the counter, shove it in the closet. Well, you're going to create problems for yourself later. Next time you actually have to get something that does live in that closet, I'm going to have to get a whole bunch of junk out of the way, get the thing I need, put it back. This is going to cause all kinds of delays and problems. You're not going to find the stuff you need. This is how I think of technical debt. Usually when you're building a product, a technical product, let's say software, there's a right way to design something. For example, a block of code. You shouldn't write it more than once. Right? If you need to use this block of code 5 places, you should write it once and point to it from those 5 places. But that can take a lot of time and effort. And sometimes people in a rush are just going to take that block of code and copy and paste it 5 different places. And now if that code has a problem, it's got a defect, I got to change it. I got to change it in 5 different places. And so this is technical debt, right? And so this is an accumulation of just digital clutter, technical clutter, that can cause real quality problems. It can cause future features to take longer than they should. And it can really cause a transparency problem because we think we're progressing forward at a certain pace and we're spending a third, a half, a majority of our time wading through this technical clutter. I don't know. Is that a fair example of technical debt for people that aren't familiar?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, it's something you're going to have to pay back in the future. And it kind of leads me to thinking about financial debt. I mean, if we took the terms technical debt, financial debt, and kind of see where they overlap, most people know what financial debt is. You know, you borrow money because you don't have the money in your pocket, and you go buy something, and then you pay back that loan, typically with interest. And sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes it's a bad thing. Like, for example, it's 2024 in September, and we're dealing with a crazy housing situation where house prices are high and interest rates are higher, and it's really hard to move right now. And so you have to take on a lot of debt to move. Right. And a lot of families are just thinking, I'm going to wait, which means they're not selling their house. And now we've got this whole lockup in the housing industry. So debt, okay, we get it. It can be a really, really bad thing if you take on too much debt. And so it basically with financial debt, it stops you from buying other things in the future. Right. I buy myself that house at 7.5% interest. That means I'm not buying a car. And that means car companies aren't selling as many cars. So they're laying people off. And then they're not buying your products and services. So now you're laid off.
Right.
And
you've got all kinds of cascading problems. Yeah. And just the monthly payments, right? Take that, what you just said about a mortgage and multiply that by, I've got a mortgage, I've got a car payment, I've bought some new furniture, so I got a payment for that. Like, if you are paying all those payments, you don't have any income left over for other stuff. And that's how technical debt, if you put this digital clutter all over your product, you're going to be spending a majority of your time fighting through that technical debt instead of using your income, your resources, to actually build new stuff, build new value. But go ahead, continue.
I mean, that's really where I was going with it. I mean, when you're straddled in debt, when you're overburdened, you can't do things that you want to do, like take your family to Disneyland. You're going to be stuck and you're going to be unhappy. So in technical worlds, try not to borrow too much from the future to get stuff done today, because you're just going to pay more for it in the future. And who knows? You're going to lose your competitive advantage. You're going to lose your ability to retain customers. I mean, just as a developer, it's a very frustrating experience to work in a heavily debt-laden technical environment. So
Yeah.
be careful with it. That's all I got to say. Don't not do it. Just be careful with how you use it.
Yeah, well, I think that begs the question. Like, I usually hear technical debt being talked about as a bad thing, and I think it often can be, just like, taking out a bunch of financial debt without any idea of if or when I can be able to pay this back can be a bad thing. There's also responsible use of financial debt where you sit down and say, okay, this is my income, this is my debt to income ratio, and this is how much I can afford every month for a mortgage or blah, blah, blah. Is there a responsible use of technical debt?
I think so. If you have to, if you're going to go out of business in 2 weeks, if you don't get a feature out today, and it's a lot of work, you're going to have to make some shortcuts.
Yeah.
And it's a risk you just have to take. But
Yeah.
if you're in the rhythm of always taking those risks for low value things, like, hey, we've got customers, we don't have any real business problems, but you're still shortcutting. Now we're
Right.
going the other direction where you're living on a borrowed income. So in some cases, it makes sense. There's an opportunity. If I don't capitalize on the opportunity now, it goes away. To capitalize on that opportunity, I need to take a shortcut.
I agree with that. I think another scenario where this can be debatable and just everything we're saying, I think those two words you said before can just be wrapped up in be careful, right? Be very careful with what I'm about to say too. I think if you're running an experiment, if there's something that we have some data to suggest our user base, our customers, our marketplace might be interested in this thing, this feature, this capability, whatever. And I can design it and architect it, and it's going to take me, X amount of time. Or I can create a small experiment. In the Professional Scrum with User Experience class, we talk about what's the smallest experiment I could run to get some learning, to get some real data, to confirm direction. Could I run an experiment that costs me 10% of what the real feature that can at least validate direction, so that if I'm wrong, if my hunch turns out to be no, our customers don't care about this, I didn't waste 10 times the experiment of time, effort, energy, money, whatever. I think you have to be really careful about that, because if you do that, you actually have two pieces of work. You have the experiment, and then you have the item on your product backlog to, if the experiment succeeds, we have some rework to do. And if you take that on with full transparency, eyes wide open, everyone's understands the risk reward scenario here, that can be a responsible use of technical debt. What often happens is, oh, just go do the quick and dirty way and we'll fix it sometime later. Nothing gets added to the product backlog. Nobody really understands the risk reward trade-off that you just did. And so that little temporary solution lives forever and is polluting your code forever. Like that's the dark side of it. So you got to be really careful. If you're going to choose to take on technical debt, it should be to promote learning, and there should be thinking through, if we learn that we should move forward, what's the real solution and where is that? Make that transparent in your product backlog.
Absolutely.